Welcome back to the Mike Huckabee Show. Dr. John Eastman is the chairman of the National Organization for Marriage. It's, I think, a wonderful organization. I've done some events with them and have been very proud to be affiliated or associated with them anytime I've ever had the occasion to do so. I wanted to say that up front because this is an organization, essentially, that tries to stand for traditional marriage, and I think they do it in a very responsible way. They are also one of the targets from the IRS, who had their application slow-walked by the Internal Revenue Service, and they're not taking it lying down. Dr. John Eastman joins me now. Dr. Eastman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Governor, thank you for having me on your program and for all you do.
Well, you guys have been identified as one of the targets. The IRS apparently they don't care much for what you guys stand for. Why not? What is it so dangerous about the National Organization for Marriage?
Well, we support traditional marriage. You know, I try to figure out why it is that groups like ours are under attack, and all of these pieces get tied together. It's a fight about big government, and the institutions that stand in the way of big government, cradle to grave, we're going to control everything you do, government, are organizations like the church, the family, and groups like the Boy Scouts. And it's not a surprise, I think, that all three are under attack. But the specific attack against us is not just the slow walking of our nonprofit status. We got our 501c4 status back in 2008. It's the illegal disclosure of our confidential tax returns that happened last March of 2012 to the national co-chair of the Obama for President campaign.
Let's go back. I want to repeat that again, John, because I think this is pretty explosive. It's one thing to say that, you know, an application got tied up in bureaucratic red tape. That's inexcusable and unforgivable. But what you're saying is that the information that by law is confidential on your tax return was handed over to the co-chairman of the Obama reelection campaign.
That's right. So let me walk very precisely through the steps and the evidence. In March of 2012, a copy of our confidential tax return was posted on the website of the Human Rights Campaign, which is the leading pro-gay marriage organization in the country. We're a 501c4. That's a nonprofit that's allowed to engage in political activities. We have to make public certain portions of our tax return, and we do. But like every other nonprofit status, there's also portions of our tax returns that are as private and confidential as your individual private 1040 tax returns. And it was that portion, that Schedule B, that lists all of our major donors and their addresses, that was given to the Human Rights Campaign, and they posted it on our website for the explicit purpose of then targeting our donors, harassing them, intimidating them, trying to chill them away from engaging in the political fights that we engage in. The head of the Human Rights Campaign at the time was Joseph Solemnese, who had just recently been named as the national co-chair of the Obama presidential reelection campaign. Now, how did we know that this came from the Internal Revenue Service rather than from a whistleblower or a disgruntled employee within our own organization? Well, the Human Rights Campaign posted this as a PDF file, and it was redacted. There's a big redaction right across the middle of the page diagonally. Our computer technicians were able to remove the redaction layer on the PDF to look at the underlying original document, and on that original document is stamped internal IRS codes and disclosure, warning this is an official document for official use only, not to be disclosed.
I mean, you literally do have, at that point, a smoking gun, don't you?
We do. I suppose it's possible that somebody hacked into one of the most sophisticated secure computer systems in the world, the IRS computer systems, and managed to get just this document. Or I suppose that, that somebody fraudulently claimed they were an officer at our organization and sought access to their own tax returns, which they had already filed. But the much more likely scenario is that somebody in the IRS, shortly after the head of Human Rights Campaign became national co-chair for the Obama presidential reelection effort, disclosed our document. That's a felony to have done that. It's a felony punishable of 5 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. It's been a felony since post-Watergate. It was a misdemeanor before Richard Nixon did things like this, and I remind people that this was one of the articles of impeachments that had been drawn up against Richard Nixon before he resigned. And Congress in 1976 created a higher criminal penalty and made it a felony because they were so concerned about the abuse of the IRS for political purposes.
You know, this is really stunning, and especially in light of hearing the testimony of Stephen Miller before Congress this morning. I'm not sure, John, if you had an opportunity to hear it, but his whole defense was that there were some mistakes made, but there was no partisanship, and that they were just trying to be very efficient, and that's why all of this happened, in their attempt to be incredibly efficient. This is not efficiency they're after with the National Organization for Marriage. They take information, they feloniously give it away to an organization that hates you, and then expect us to believe that that's all in the name of efficiency?
Well, that's right, but the story gets even more bizarre, because shortly after we discovered this, in April of 2012, we filed complaints and requests for investigation with both the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, that's the office that authored the report that came out this week, and also with the Department of Justice. We know that the Inspector General conducted an investigation because they asked us for a lot of documents trying to demonstrate that this came from with us. When that turned out not to be true, the investigation kind of closed up, and we've heard nothing more about it since last summer. We then filed a series of Freedom of Information Act requests to get, more information about who committed this crime against us, because we don't have the ability to bring the criminal charges. We're not the Department of Justice. But that person is also civilly liable to us for $1,000 in damages per disclosure and illegal inspection of our tax returns, for punitive damages, for attorney's fees, and what have you. So we filed Freedom of Information Act requests trying to get to the bottom of this. And I got to tell you, the responses out of the government have just been bizarre. The first one, the IRS said, we asked for any documents in their files, and they said, well, whatever documents we have are under the jurisdiction of the Inspector General, so, talk to them. And they would only give us documents that were in their files. So we filed another request with the IRS, and their response was, we don't take multiple requests. That you've already asked this, and we already answered it. The third one, Governor, is the most bizarre. We then asked for, as we're legally allowed to do, the status of the investigation, whether it was conclusive or inconclusive, and if there was anybody identified as committing this crime, who it is. Once their appeals have run, we're allowed to have that information. The Inspector General's office took the position that the very statute that makes it a felony to disclose a taxpayer's tax returns protects the individual who committed that felony because he is himself a taxpayer and the subject of an IRS investigation.
Unbelievable. Now, John, we only have about a minute left. I got to ask you, you guys are suing the IRS, aren't you?
Well, we are. We have not filed a suit yet because we had this last administrative piece. That last round, that Orwellian doublespeak round, just occurred on May 3rd. So, we've got to close the loop on that piece before we can file the suit, but that'll be sometime before the end of this month.
I think it's very significant that that's going on, and I want to commend you for not just, taking it lying down and maybe even making some noise but not acting upon it. I think this has got to work its way through the courts because there's going to be discovery, depositions, people under oath, judges, a much different kind of atmosphere than there will ever be in a congressional hearing, and this is where this belongs. So let me say, I know it's not going to be pleasant or inexpensive, but I think it's very critical on behalf of every organization that you guys follow through with this lawsuit, and I commend you for it.
Well, thank you. And Governor, if you could send your audience to our webpage, nationformarriage.org, they can donate there to help us with these efforts. But I think it's critically important that we get to the bottom of who committed these felonies, and we're committed to staying on task with this until that information is known.
Well, I will definitely remind our listeners, nationformarriage.org is the website, and it is going to be a long slog of a process. And, I know that they're going to need help because, they raise money for their cause, not to have to fight the IRS in court, which is one of the things I think that big government does. It forces people to use up their resources to have to hire attorneys and accountants to fight the government rather than be protected by the government. Our thanks to Dr. John Eastman, chairman of the National Organization for Marriage. Go to their website, nationformarriage.org. I hope you will get involved. Stand behind them. Let your congressman and senator know enough is enough. We've got to get to the bottom of this.